never imagined her future would be decided by a letter, or that her husband would be the most feared man in the valley. But what she didn't know was that beneath the war paint and scars, he carried a quiet longing that would change both their lives forever. Thank you so much for watching and for all your comments. Let me know at the end if you liked the story, and where you're watching from and why you're following this. The autumn wind carried the scent of wood smoke and dying leaves through the Mohawk Valley, as 17-year-old Sarah Whitmore pressed her face against the cold window of her father's trading post. Beyond the frost-kissed glass, the wilderness stretched endlessly, a tapestry of crimson and gold that marked the boundary between the colonial settlement of Fort Hunter and the vast Mohawk territories. She had lived here all her life, learning the language and customs of the Kanyen'kehá:ka people, who traded furs and goods with her father, but never had she imagined that this world would become her own in such an unexpected way. Her father, Thomas Whitmore, stood behind the wooden counter, his weathered hands trembling as he read the letter for the third time. The paper bore the seal of the colonial governor, and its contents had turned their quiet life upside down in mere moments. Sarah watched his face age with each passing second, the lines around his eyes deepening with worry and resignation. "Father, what does it say?" Sarah asked, though she already suspected the answer from the way his shoulders had slumped when he first broke the seal. Thomas looked up at his daughter, his only child, the image of her late mother with cascading auburn hair and eyes the color of summer moss. "The governor has negotiated a treaty with the Mohawk Nation," he began, his voice rough with emotion, "to strengthen the alliance between our peoples, to ensure peace along the frontier. They have requested that certain colonial families demonstrate their commitment through marriage bonds." Sarah's heart began to pound. "Marriage bonds. You are to wed Takoda, the war chief of the Wolf Clan. The ceremony is to take place in 3 days' time." Thomas set the letter down, unable to meet her eyes. "I tried to refuse, Sarah. I sent 3 letters to Albany, but the governor was adamant. If we refuse, our trading license will be revoked, and we will be forced to leave the valley. More than that, the fragile peace we have worked so hard to maintain could shatter." The room seemed to tilt around Sarah. She had heard of Takoda. Everyone in the valley had. He was a legend whispered about in fearful tones by the settlers, and spoken of with reverence by the Mohawk people. They said he had killed 20 men in battle, that he could track a deer through a rainstorm, that his war cry alone could freeze the blood of his enemies. He was fierce, uncompromising, a warrior shaped by violence and loss. The very thought of being bound to such a man sent ice through her veins. "But father, I do not know him. I have never even seen him," Sarah whispered, gripping the edge of the windowsill until her knuckles turned white. "I know, my dear child. I know." Thomas came around the counter and placed his hands on her shoulders. "If there were any other way, I would take it. But the governor has made it clear that this union is essential to preventing another war. The Mohawk elders have agreed, and Takoda himself has accepted the arrangement." Sarah turned back to the window, her mind racing. She had always known that her life as the daughter of a frontier trader would not follow the genteel path of girls back in Boston or Philadelphia. Here, survival depended on cooperation with the native peoples, on understanding the delicate balance between cultures. But to marry a man she did not know, a warrior whose very name inspired fear, felt like stepping off a cliff into darkness. That evening, as the sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, Sarah walked along the river that wound past the settlement. The Mohawk River flowed swift and cold, carrying leaves and small branches in its current. She needed to think, to somehow process the reality that her entire future had been decided by men in distant offices who saw her only as a political tool. She was so lost in thought that she did not hear the footsteps behind her, until a deep voice spoke in perfect English, only slightly accented. "You should not walk alone so far from the fort as darkness approaches. There are wolves in these woods, and not all of them walk on 4 legs. Sarah spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. The man who stood before her was tall and powerfully built, with broad shoulders that spoke of years wielding weapons and carrying heavy loads. His skin was bronzed by sun and wind, his black hair fell past his shoulders, and his dark eyes held an intensity that seemed to see straight through her. He wore traditional Mohawk clothing, deerskin leggings and a shirt decorated with intricate beadwork, and a tomahawk hung from his belt. This could only be Takoda. "I am not afraid of wolves," Sarah said, forcing her voice to remain steady despite the rapid beating of her heart. "And I can take care of myself." A slight smile tugged at the corner of Takoda's mouth, transforming his severe features into something almost approachable. "I do not doubt it. Thomas Whitmore's daughter is known for her courage and her quick mind. The traders speak of how you learned our language when you were just a child, how you mediate disputes with wisdom beyond your years." Sarah blinked in surprise. "You know of me? Did you think I would agree to marry a woman I knew nothing about?" Takoda stepped closer, his movements as fluid and controlled as a hunting cat. "I have watched you from a distance for many moons. I have seen you help my people when they come to trade, treating them with respect when other settlers look upon us with suspicion. I have heard you laugh with the children and speak words of comfort to the elderly. You may not know me, Sarah Whitmore, but I know you." The revelation sent a strange warmth through Sarah's chest, though she fought against it. "Then you know that I did not choose this marriage, that it was decided for us by others." "Yes," Takoda acknowledged, his expression growing serious again. "Just as I did not choose it. The elders of my clan and the colonial governor decided our fates without asking what our hearts desired. But we are both bound by duty, are we not? You to your father and your people, me to my clan and the future of the Mohawk nation." Sarah studied his face in the fading light, searching for some sign of the fierce warrior she had been told to fear. Instead, she saw something unexpected in his eyes, a deep loneliness, a weariness that spoke of burdens carried alone for too long. "They say you are a great warrior, that you have defeated countless enemies and never known fear." Takoda's jaw tightened. "They say many things. Most are exaggerations meant to frighten our enemies and inspire our warriors. Yes, I have fought in battles. Yes, I have killed men who sought to harm my people. But I am not the monster they make me out to be." He paused, his gaze drifting to the river. "I am simply a man who has done what was necessary to protect those I love, and who has paid the price for it in scars both visible and hidden." The honesty in his words struck Sarah deeply. She realized that Takoda was as much a prisoner of his reputation as she was of her circumstances. "What do you want?" she asked quietly. "If you could choose freely, what would you want?" For a long moment, Takoda said nothing, his eyes fixed on the flowing water as if it might hold the answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I want what I have never had. A place where I belong not because of what I can kill or conquer, but simply because of who I am. A home that is more than a longhouse filled with warriors planning the next raid. Someone who sees past the legend to the man beneath." He turned back to her, and in his eyes she saw a vulnerability that took her breath away. "But such dreams are not for men like me." Sarah felt something shift inside her, a crack forming in the wall of fear and resentment she had built around this arranged marriage. "Perhaps," she said softly, "we are both prisoners of what others expect us to be. Perhaps in this marriage that neither of us chose, we might find the freedom to become something different." Takoda looked at her with an expression of surprise and something that might have been hope. "You would consider giving this union a true chance, not simply enduring it as a duty?" "I do not know," Sarah admitted honestly. 3 days ago, my future seemed clear if unremarkable. Now everything has changed. But I do know that I would rather face the unknown with honesty than build a life on pretense and resentment. She met his eyes directly. "If we are to be bound together, then let us at least be honest with each other. Let us see if there might be something real beneath this political arrangement." A genuine smile crossed Takoda's face, and Sarah realized with a start that he was extraordinarily handsome when not wearing the mask of the fearsome warrior. "Then let me be honest with you now, Sarah Whitmore. I am afraid. I have faced enemy warriors without flinching, but the thought of failing to be a good husband, of disappointing you, terrifies me more than any battle ever has." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes at the raw honesty of his confession. "And I am afraid too. Afraid of leaving everything I have known. Afraid of not being strong enough for the life that awaits me. Afraid that I will lose myself in trying to become what everyone expects." They stood together by the river as darkness fell around them, two people brought together by forces beyond their control, yet finding in each other's honesty the first fragile threads of connection. The wind rustled through the trees, and in the distance a wolf howled. Whether in warning or welcome, neither could say. The morning of the wedding ceremony dawned cold and clear, with frost glittering on the grass like scattered diamonds. Sarah stood in her small room above the trading post, staring at the reflection that seemed like a stranger. She wore a dress that bridged two worlds, colonial linen dyed deep blue, decorated with intricate Mohawk beadwork that had been a gift from Takoda's clan. Her auburn hair had been braided in the traditional Mohawk style by two women from the Wolf clan, who had come before sunrise to prepare her with gentle hands and encouraging words she only partially understood. Her father knocked softly before entering, his eyes reddening when he saw her. "Your mother would have been so proud of you, Sarah. Not because of this marriage, but because of the woman you have become. Strong, compassionate, brave beyond measure." "I do not feel brave, father," Sarah whispered, her hands trembling slightly as she smoothed the fabric of her dress. "I feel like I am standing on the edge of a great chasm, about to leap without knowing if there is solid ground on the other side." Thomas embraced his daughter tightly. "That is precisely what bravery is, my dear. Not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. And I have seen the way Takoda looks at you these past 2 days. Whatever else may come, I do not believe he will let you fall." Sarah thought back to the previous day, when Takoda had come to the trading post with members of his clan to discuss the ceremony and the arrangements for their future life together. She had watched him carefully, noting how he listened more than he spoke, how he treated even the youngest members of his clan with respect, how his eyes would find hers across the room and hold her gaze with an intensity that sent warmth flooding through her body. He was indeed fierce, but she was beginning to understand that his fierceness was born of protection rather than cruelty, of devotion rather than violence. The ceremony took place in a clearing between the fort and the Mohawk village, a neutral ground that symbolized the union of two peoples. Colonial settlers stood on one side, Mohawk warriors and families on the other, while the autumn wind whispered through the trees overhead. Sarah walked forward with her father, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain everyone could hear it. But when she saw Takoda waiting for her at the center of the clearing, something inside her calmed. He stood tall and proud in ceremonial dress, his chest bare despite the cold, decorated with paint that told the story of his clan and his achievements. His long black hair was adorned with eagle feathers, and around his neck hung a necklace of bear claws. He should have looked intimidating, a warrior in full regalia, but his eyes were soft as they met hers, filled with a tenderness that made her breath catch. The ceremony was conducted by both a Mohawk elder and a colonial minister, blending traditions in a way that had never been done before in the valley. The elder spoke in the Mohawk language, his words rhythmic and powerful, speaking of the joining of two souls, of the responsibility of marriage, of the strength found in unity. The minister followed with prayers and blessings in English, his voice carrying across the clearing. Sarah understood that they were not just marrying each other. They were marrying two worlds, two futures, two hopes for peace. When it came time to speak their vows, Takoda took Sarah's hands in his, and she was surprised by their gentleness, despite the calluses earned from years of wielding weapons and tools. He spoke first in Mohawk, then translated to English so all could understand. "Sarah Whitmore, I stand before you not as a warrior, not as a chief, but as a man who has known loneliness and who sees in you the possibility of belonging. I vow to protect you not just with my strength, but with my honesty. I vow to honor you not just with my words, but with my actions. I vow to build with you a home where both our peoples can find welcome and where our hearts can find peace." Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she replied, her voice stronger than she expected. "Takoda of the Wolf clan, I stand before you as a woman who has been afraid of the unknown, but who chooses to walk into it with you at my side. I vow to learn your ways as you learn mine. I vow to stand with you in times of hardship and to celebrate with you in times of joy. I vow to see you as you truly are, not as legend makes you, and to help you find the belonging you have sought for so long." As the elder bound their hands together with a woven cord, symbolizing their joined lives, Sarah felt the weight of dozens of eyes upon them. This marriage was about more than their personal happiness. It carried the hopes of those who dreamed of lasting peace and the skepticism of those who doubted such a thing was possible. But in that moment, looking into Takoda's eyes, she allowed herself to focus only on the connection growing between them, fragile but real. The feast that followed brought both communities together in an unprecedented gathering. Long tables had been set up in the clearing, laden with food from both cultures: roasted venison and turkey, corn pudding and succotash, fresh bread and berry preserves, pumpkin dishes and dried fish. Sarah sat beside Takoda, acutely aware of his presence, of the warmth radiating from his body, of the way his arm would occasionally brush against hers. As the afternoon wore on and the autumn sun began its descent, Takoda leaned close and spoke quietly, so only she could hear. "There is something I must tell you before we go to our new home. Something about why the elders chose me for this marriage, beyond my position as war chief." Sarah turned to face him, noting the tension in his jaw. "What is it?" "5 winters ago, I lost my wife and infant son to fever," Takoda said, his voice tight with old pain. "I became wild in my grief, throwing myself into battle after battle, seeking either glory or death, I did not care which. I earned my reputation as a fierce warrior during those dark moons, but I also lost something of myself. The elders hoped that this marriage might bring me back from the edge, might remind me that there is more to life than war and vengeance." Sarah's heart ached for the pain she heard in his words. She reached out and placed her hand over his, a gesture that felt natural despite their short acquaintance. "I am so sorry for your loss, Takoda. No one should have to endure such grief. I tell you this not to burden you with my sorrow, but so you understand that I know what it means to love and to lose," Takoda continued, turning his hand to clasp hers. "I will not dishonor their memory by giving you less than my whole heart. But I am afraid that I have forgotten how to be gentle, how to be anything other than a weapon pointed at our enemies." "Then we will remember together," Sarah said softly. "You will teach me to be strong, and I will teach you to be gentle again. Is that not what marriage should be? 2 people helping each other become better versions of themselves?" Takoda looked at her with such gratitude and wonder that Sarah felt her own heart begin to open in ways she had not anticipated. This was not the cold political arrangement she had feared. This was the beginning of something that might, with time and patience, become real and deep and true. As evening approached, it was time for them to leave for their new home, a cabin that had been built specifically for them, positioned between the fort and the Mohawk village, another symbol of the bridge they represented. The structure combined colonial building techniques with Mohawk design, with sturdy log walls and a traditional smoke hole in the roof. Inside, members of both communities had contributed furnishings and supplies, filling the space with gifts meant to help them start their new life. Sarah's father embraced her one final time before she left, whispering in her ear, "Be happy, my daughter. That is all your mother and I ever wanted for you." She saw tears in his eyes as she climbed into the wagon that would carry her belongings to the cabin, and she had to swallow hard against the lump in her throat. Takoda rode beside the wagon on a magnificent black horse, occasionally glancing over at her with an expression she was learning to read, concern mixed with hope, uncertainty tempered by determination. When they arrived at the cabin, he dismounted and came to help her down from the wagon with surprising gentleness, his strong hand steady on her waist. "Welcome to our home, Sarah," he said, and the word "our" sent a flutter through her chest. They spent the evening unpacking her belongings and arranging the cabin together, a domestic activity that felt both strange and comfortable. Sarah noticed how Takoda was careful to make space for her things, how he asked her opinion on where furniture should be placed, how he was trying so hard to make her feel that this was truly her home and not just his dwelling that she was entering. As night fell and they lit the fire in the hearth, casting dancing shadows across the walls, Sarah felt the weight of what came next. They were married now, bound together by law and ceremony, and the night stretched before them filled with expectations and uncertainties. She stood by the window, looking out at the darkness, her heart racing with a mixture of nervousness and something else she was not quite ready to name. Takoda approached quietly, standing beside her without touching, respecting the space between them. Sarah, I want you to know that I will not demand anything of you that you are not ready to give. This marriage was arranged by others, but what we build within it should be our choice. We have time to learn each other, to grow comfortable in each other's presence. There is no need to rush. Sarah turned to look at him, this man who was fierce enough to terrify enemies in battle, yet gentle enough to understand her unspoken fears. The firelight played across his features, highlighting the strong lines of his face, the sincerity in his dark eyes. She realized that she did not want to spend this night in fear and awkwardness, maintaining careful distance. She wanted to take the first real step toward the future they had both spoken of. I appreciate your patience, Takoda, she said, her voice soft but steady. But I meant what I said in my vows. I choose to walk into the unknown with you, not to hide from it. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the warmth and strength of it. Teach me your ways. Tell me your stories. Help me understand the man behind the legend. A slow smile spread across Takoda's face, transforming it with genuine joy. He led her to the furs spread before the fire, and they sat together, and he began to speak. He told her of his childhood, of learning to hunt with his father, of the games he played with other children in the village. He told her of the traditions of the Wolf clan, of the responsibilities of a war chief, of the delicate balance the Mohawk people maintained with the land and with each other. Sarah listened to Takoda's stories late into the night, watching the firelight dance across his face as he spoke of his world with a passion that made her heart swell. In turn, she shared her own memories, of her mother's death when she was 12, of learning to run the trading post alongside her father, of the books she had read that told of faraway places she would never see. They talked until their voices grew hoarse and their eyelids heavy, and when they finally lay down to sleep on the furs beside the fire, Sarah felt a contentment she had not expected to find so quickly. The weeks that followed were a revelation. Each morning, Sarah woke to find Takoda already awake, preparing breakfast or tending to tasks around their home. He was patient as he taught her the skills she would need to thrive in this new life: how to identify medicinal plants, how to track animals through the forest, how to prepare traditional Mohawk dishes. In return, she taught him to read and write in English, something he had always wanted to learn but never had the time for during his years as a warrior. Their days fell into a comfortable rhythm, but Sarah quickly realized that their marriage existed within a larger, more fragile context. Tensions between the colonists and various native tribes were rising throughout the region, and not everyone was pleased with the alliance symbolized by their union. Some settlers viewed Takoda with suspicion and fear, crossing to the other side of the road when they saw him in the fort. Some Mohawk warriors questioned whether he had grown soft, whether his marriage to a white woman had compromised his loyalty to his people. One cold November morning, Sarah was at her father's trading post helping him inventory supplies when 3 British soldiers entered, their red coats bright against the gray sky outside. The leader, a lieutenant named Crawford, had a reputation for being hostile toward the native peoples and dismissive of those who traded with them. "Thomas Whitmore," Crawford said, his voice dripping with disdain. "I hear congratulations are in order. Your daughter has married herself a savage. How very progressive of you." Sarah felt anger flare hot in her chest, but her father placed a calming hand on her arm before she could respond. "Lieutenant Crawford, my daughter has married Takoda of the Wolf clan in a ceremony blessed by both our peoples and approved by the governor himself. I suggest you show proper respect." Crawford laughed harshly. "Respect? For a political stunt meant to appease the Indians? Everyone knows these marriages never work. The savage will either beat her into submission or abandon her when the novelty wears off. Mark my words, Whitmore, this peace you think you've secured is an illusion. The Mohawks will turn on us the moment it suits them, and your daughter will be caught in the middle." Before Sarah could respond, the door opened again and Takoda entered, his presence filling the room with quiet authority. He had obviously heard Crawford's words, and though his expression remained calm, Sarah could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand instinctively moved toward the tomahawk at his belt before he consciously stopped himself. "Lieutenant Crawford," Takoda said in perfect English, his voice level but cold, "you speak of things you do not understand. My people have honored every treaty we have signed, even when your people have not. We have opened our lands to trade, offered friendship when we could have offered war, and you repay us with insults and suspicion." Crawford's face reddened. "You dare lecture me, Indian? I have fought in battles while you were skulking in the woods, ambushing honest soldiers. Do not think that marrying a white woman makes you civilized or gives you the right to speak to me as an equal." Sarah stepped forward, her voice sharp with fury. "That is my husband you are insulting, Lieutenant. A man who has shown more honor and courage in a single day than you likely have in your entire military career. He is worth 10 of you, and I will thank you to leave my father's trading post immediately." The confrontation might have escalated into violence if Thomas had not intervened, diplomatically ushering the soldiers out while promising to discuss their supply needs at another time. When they were gone, Sarah turned to Takoda, expecting to see anger, but instead found him looking at her with something like awe. "You defended me," he said quietly, "even though it might cause you trouble with your own people." "You are my people now," Sarah replied fiercely. "You are my husband, and I will not stand by while ignorant men insult you." She realized the truth of her words as she spoke them. Somewhere in the past weeks, Takoda had ceased to be a stranger forced upon her, and had become someone she genuinely cared for, someone she wanted to protect. That night, as they lay together in their cabin, Takoda pulled Sarah close and kissed her forehead tenderly. "I have been holding back," he admitted. "Afraid to let myself care too deeply, afraid that if I opened my heart fully, I would lose you as I lost my first family. But today, when you stood up for me, I realized that fear is a poor foundation for a marriage. Sarah, I am falling in love with you. Perhaps I have been since that first evening by the river when you spoke to me with such honesty." Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes as she looked up at him. "And I am falling in love with you, Takoda. Not with the legend or the warrior, but with the man who teaches me about plants with such patience, who laughs at my terrible attempts to speak Mohawk, who holds me gently as if I am precious. You have given me a home not just in this cabin but in your heart, and I want you to know that you have the same in mine." They kissed then, a kiss that held all the emotions they had been carefully guarding, all the hope and fear and growing affection that had been building between them. It was a kiss that sealed not just their physical union, but the true joining of their hearts. But their happiness was soon tested by forces beyond their control. In early December, word reached the valley that a series of brutal raids had occurred along the frontier, with settlements burned and families killed. The perpetrators were not Mohawk, but warriors from a rival tribe seeking to drive the colonists from the region entirely. However, fear and prejudice led many settlers to blame all native peoples, and calls for retaliation grew louder each day. Takoda was summoned to a council meeting with the Mohawk elders and the colonial authorities to discuss how to respond to the crisis. Sarah insisted on accompanying him, knowing that her presence might help bridge the divide between the two groups. The meeting took place in the fort's Great Hall, with British officers on one side and Mohawk leaders on the other, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Colonel Morrison, the highest-ranking British officer in the region, spoke first. "These attacks cannot go unanswered. We must organize a military expedition to punish those responsible and show that we will not tolerate such aggression." The Mohawk elder, a man named Otichiani, responded with measured words. "We agree that those who committed these raids must face justice, but you must not make the mistake of painting all native peoples with the same brush. The Mohawk have kept the peace, and we will help you identify and apprehend the true culprits. But if you launch indiscriminate attacks against innocent villages, you will shatter the alliance we have worked so hard to build." Lieutenant Crawford, who was also present, sneered. "How convenient. You offer to help us find the guilty while protecting your own. For all we know, Mohawk warriors participated in these raids. How can we trust any of you?" Takoda stood, his voice ringing with authority. "You can trust us because we have given you no reason not to. When have the Mohawk broken our word? When have we betrayed a treaty or violated an agreement? Never. We have offered friendship and trade, and in return, we have been met with suspicion and disrespect. But still, we honor our commitments because that is who we are." Sarah rose to stand beside her husband, her heart pounding, but her voice steady. Gentlemen, I am proof of the commitment both peoples have made to peace. I was asked to marry Takoda to symbolize the union of our worlds, and I have done so gladly, because I have come to know the Mohawk people as honorable and trustworthy. My husband is a man of integrity who would never allow innocent blood to be shed. If he says the Mohawk will help find those responsible, then you can believe him. Colonel Morrison studied them both carefully, then nodded slowly. Very well. Takoda, you will lead a joint expedition of Mohawk warriors and British soldiers to track down the raiders and bring them to justice. This will demonstrate the strength of our alliance and show that we stand together against those who would destroy the peace. It was agreed that Takoda would depart within 2 days, leading a group of 20 men, 10 Mohawk warriors and 10 British soldiers, into the wilderness to hunt down the raiders. Sarah felt fear grip her heart at the thought of him riding into danger, but she understood that this mission was crucial not just for justice, but for proving that the alliance between their peoples could withstand even the most severe tests. The night before Takoda was to leave, Sarah held him tightly, memorizing the feel of his arms around her, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "Come back to me," she whispered. "I have only just found you. I cannot bear the thought of losing you." Takoda tilted her face up to his eyes fierce with determination and love. "I will come back, Sarah. I have finally found where I belong. Here, with you, in this life we are building together. No raid, no danger, nothing will keep me from returning to you. This I swear." They made love that night with a desperation born of impending separation, clinging to each other as if they could somehow stop the dawn from coming. And when morning arrived too soon, Sarah watched from the doorway of their cabin as Takoda mounted his horse and rode away with his men, her hand pressed against her heart as if to keep it from breaking. The days that followed were agony. Sarah threw herself into work at the trading post, helping her father and trying to keep her mind occupied, but every sound made her jump, hoping it was news of Takoda's return. She spent her evenings in their cabin, surrounded by his belongings, praying to every god she knew of for his safe return. 2 weeks after his departure, Sarah was helping organize supplies when a commotion outside drew her attention. She rushed to the door and saw them, Takoda and his men, riding back into the fort. But her relief turned to alarm when she saw that Takoda was wounded, his left arm bound with bloody bandages, his face pale with pain and exhaustion. She ran to him as he dismounted, catching him as he swayed with fatigue. "What happened? How badly are you hurt?" "We found the raiders," Takoda said, his voice rough. "There was a fight. We captured most of them alive, killed only those who would not surrender. The mission was a success, but I took an arrow in the arm. It is not serious, Sarah. I will heal." A British soldier stepped forward, his young face earnest. "Ma'am, your husband saved my life. When I was surrounded, he threw himself into the fight without hesitation. He is the bravest man I have ever served with, and I will tell anyone who asks that the Mohawk are true allies and honorable warriors." Over the following days, as Sarah tended to Takoda's wound and nursed him back to health, word spread throughout the valley of the expedition's success. The captured raiders confessed to their crimes, exonerating the Mohawk of any involvement, and the joint expedition became a symbol of what could be achieved when both peoples worked together. Attitudes began to shift, slowly but noticeably, as colonists and Mohawk alike saw proof that the alliance could endure even in times of crisis. As winter settled over the valley, blanketing the land in pristine snow, Sarah and Takoda found themselves growing closer with each passing day. His wound healed cleanly, and he regained his strength, but something had changed in him. The haunted look that had shadowed his eyes when they first met was gone, replaced by a peace and contentment that transformed him utterly. One evening, as they sat together by the fire, Takoda pulled Sarah into his lap and kissed her deeply. "Do you know what you have given me?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. "You have given me back my life. Before you, I was merely existing, moving through my days like a ghost. But you saw past the legend to the man beneath, and you loved that man even when he had forgotten how to love himself. You have given me a home, Sarah. Not just this cabin, but a place in your heart where I truly belong." Sarah felt tears streaming down her cheeks as she cupped his face in her hands. and you have given me a life I never imagined possible. You have shown me strength and gentleness, courage and compassion. You have taught me that love is not about perfect circumstances, but about choosing each other every day, even when it is difficult. I love you, Takoda, with all that I am. As spring approached and the snow began to melt, revealing the first green shoots of new growth, Sarah realized she was carrying Takoda's child. When she told him, he lifted her up and spun her around, his laughter ringing through their cabin with pure joy. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach and spoke in Mohawk, blessing their unborn child and promising to be the father he had never had the chance to be before. Their child, a daughter with her mother's auburn hair and her father's dark eyes, was born in late summer, delivered with the help of both a colonial midwife and a Mohawk medicine woman working together. They named her Awandela, which meant early day in Mohawk, symbolizing the new dawn she represented for both their peoples. As Sarah held her daughter for the first time, with Takoda's arms wrapped around them both, she reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. She had been commanded to wed a fierce warrior she had never met, forced into a marriage that had seemed like a prison. But she had discovered that sometimes the paths we resist most fiercely are the ones that lead us exactly where we need to be. Takoda had been a legend, a warrior shaped by violence and loss, a man who longed quietly for belonging, but had forgotten how to reach for it. Together they had built something neither could have created alone, a bridge between worlds, a testament to the power of understanding and respect, and a love that had grown from duty into something deep and true and lasting. Years later, when their daughter was old enough to understand, Sarah and Takoda would tell her the story of how they met, how they had been brought together by the commands of others, but had chosen to stay together because of what they found in each other's hearts. They would tell her that the greatest courage is not in fighting battles, but in opening yourself to love when everything in you wants to hide. They would tell her that belonging is not something you find in a place, but something you create with the people who see you truly and love you anyway. And as they watched Awandela grow into a beautiful young woman who moved seamlessly between both her mother's and father's worlds, Sarah and Takoda knew that their arranged marriage had accomplished something far greater than the political alliance it was meant to secure. It had created a family built on love, respect, and the courage to see beyond fear to the possibilities that wait on the other side. In the end, the fierce Mohawk champion had found the belonging he sought, not through conquest or glory, but through the gentle persistence of a woman who had been brave enough to look past the legend and love the man. And Sarah had discovered that the future she had feared had given her a life richer and more meaningful than any she could have imagined, filled with adventure, purpose, and a love that had transformed them both. Their cabin between the fort and the village remained standing for generations, a symbol of the peace they had helped to build and the love they had chosen to nurture. And in the Mohawk Valley, the story of Takoda and Sarah became a legend of a different kind, not one of war and conquest, but of two hearts that had found their home in each other, and in doing so, had shown both their peoples that understanding and love were possible even in the most unlikely of circumstances.